The dog misunderstood what you said, go live.
Okay, Frankie has been shut off. We are back live. And we're going to take a look at, okay, get into today's agenda. Go back to looking at the arrearages and disconnections, and we wanted to take a look at the municipal experience because we didn't hear from them before. And we're going to start with Tom DiPietro. Am I massacring your name? From Green Mountain Water Environment Associates.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, thank you
The
all.
floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you all for inviting me to speak this afternoon. Very quickly, just for folks that aren't familiar, the Green Mountain Water Environment Association, or GMWEA, it's a nonprofit organization that promotes public awareness of Vermont's drinking water, wastewater, stormwater systems and professionals. We've got about 450 members across the state, mostly system operators, engineers, scientists, public work staffs, and the like, really the kind of the boots on the ground, water quality environmentalists. I'm serving currently in the organization as a past president. Finished up my term in May last year. And here to talk to you today, just I guess briefly, I think, about some information we collected in late January. So there was question about, well, the VCAP program, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. In November, there was money made available to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater utilities for customers that couldn't pay bills as a result of the pandemic. And so kind of later in that program, money was made available to the water utilities, and that was spent up rather quickly. So we did a survey of our members and various municipal officials to figure out kind of what was still out there or what the need might be going forward, because I don't know that we had a good handle on that. So what we had done is we used our various mailing lists and things like that, reached out to folks and asked them for their unpaid fees after 60 days. So if it's been 60 days or more of an unpaid fee is kind of the numbers we collected. And then we asked folks for some general comment as well of how they were doing. And I'll give you the numbers in a moment, but I just want to note, so these values that I'll give you, they include everything that is 60 days unpaid. So there's going to be some non-COVID related portion of this. We couldn't really suss that out. We were asking the utilities, not the individual customers, right? And it's difficult for them to kind of ascertain why some of the fees were unpaid or have been unpaid. But nonetheless, we heard from 96 different systems in Vermont. And the numbers we've got back are wastewater. So we're in wastewater utilities. It's just over 1.8 million in unpaid fees that are out there. For drinking water, it's about 1.7 million. For stormwater, it's 137,000 for a total of about 3.7 million in unpaid fees on these arrearages that are out there. We tried to estimate sort of what portion of the utilities, the water utilities this covered. So we did that by population, or we tried to. So we pulled population data and came up with that of the 96 systems that reported, about 325,000, the population of those systems, about 325,000. So if we kind of estimate that out to all systems in the state, we'd say that the population served by all these systems is about 450,000, give or take. So we got about 71% covered in our data, which we felt pretty good about because this was all voluntary, whether providing the information or collected by our volunteers. So if you prorate that 3.7 million, it comes out to about 5.2 million of potential arrearages that are still out there in the water sector. So that was our kind of our big survey and finding. And I can get into a little bit of what we heard if folks are interested from individual utilities. If there's other questions, I guess I'll pause for a moment.
Any questions at this point? Okay, nope. Keep going.
Okay, great. So we heard quite a bit from folks, and we were, well, basically the impacts of the pandemic are highly variable depending upon the community. Some areas saw absolutely no change, while others have seen some significant change in sort of non-payment. We asked specifically folks if they had information about what are you not doing, or what's been the problem here. And kind of the most common answer there was water utilities are unable to get into homes to install water meters. So they've everybody's kind of deferred that program and replacing of old meters for the time being, for the foreseeable future. We also heard things about reports about capital improvement projects and maintenance being deferred, regular maintenance deferred or was impacted because the staff that conducts it was furloughed. We heard and we've observed supply chains being impacted. So at first we were concerned that we wouldn't be able to get things we need, whether it's lab supplies or parts for pumps and things like that. We're finding we're still able to get those things, but just it's delayed. And so kind of managers have to plan ahead for an extra couple of weeks here. So keep things, just keep that in mind as things come up. And we also noticed early on in the pandemic, during what we refer to as the toilet paper shortage, a lot of folks were flushing things down the toilet that didn't belong there. Caused a lot of pump damage early on, pumps plugging up or becoming damaged and causing overflows or other issues, repairs that were costly. So I think we've addressed that kind of with some education and outreach since the pandemic started. But just those kind of things have backed up some utilities and kind of impacted some available funding. So hopefully, it's come to a close here going forward. We'll be in better shape, but there is still a significant need out there, I guess. So if this committee were looking to provide some kind of further COVID-related relief, it would be our recommendation to keep in mind certainly the water utilities and the need we've kind of seen that's out there.
Questions at this point?
Thank you. Just quick, Tom. Thank you. The number you said in 60-day arrearages in all three categories was 3.7 million. Is that right? Total.
That's right. And that was from 96 folks that or utility systems that provided us with data. Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Ray.
Thanks. And Mr. Petro, the 3.7 million, do you have a ballpark sense of what that sample represents of the total arrearage out there? Had you gotten 100% response?
Again, we tried to estimate that based on population. So we think of the total population served by a water system, wastewater, drinking water, stormwater. We think that's about 450,000.
Yeah.
So we estimated the population of the 96 to be about 325. So we got about 71%. So again, just kind of using those figures, we came up with a value of about 5.2 million of total arrearages. Again, that's all unpaid fees after 60 days.
Okay. And that is arrearages to date, or does that arrearages anticipating that we might be in this environment through, I don't know, June, July or something like that?
Yeah, no, good question. So we collected data between January 19th and the 28th. So that was as of the 28th, that kind of actual 3.7 and then our estimate for statewide.
Okay. And have you seen in the last month or anything, I mean, are people reporting, oh, well, now people are starting to recover on their payments? Or if we were being, I don't know, cautious or something, we might think that 5.2 is all in arrears and that there could be more arrearages yet to come of a similar magnitude between now and July or something.
Yeah, it's difficult to say based on how utilities do billing. So a lot of folks do quarterly billing. So if bills just went out in January and hadn't gone out, since the previous quarter, it's really hard to say. So payments were up to date, the information we received, but if bills went out in January, it hasn't been 60 days yet, so we don't quite what that trend is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, we'll go on to Karen. Welcome.
Thank you. And I think this may be the first time in your committee this session.
I think it is in a while. Do you know everybody?
I believe I do know everybody. Yes. Thank you. So I am with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and I wanted to essentially back up Tom's testimony and give you a little bit of background, maybe that he didn't touch on. So Act 92, which you passed last year, prohibits municipalities from disconnecting anyone from water or sewer services during a declared state of emergency. And you passed that right when you came back from the March shutdown. So that was pretty early on. There was the same prohibition for water districts that are regulated by the Public Utility Commission. And then, well, as long as I'm here, I'm going to mention that Act 102 that you passed in 2020 authorized local governments to extend or establish a new method of payment for municipal and education property taxes, or establish a grace period, or decrease or waive penalties and interest. And that piece of legislation actually expired January 1 of this year. So that may be something that the committee wants to consider again going forward. Clearly, we're not out of the pandemic. Clearly, people are still facing significant hardships in trying to pay their bills. And the VCAP program that was extended to municipalities back in late October, early November, all those funds were used up by December 8th. And then the Joint Fiscal Office actually extended additional funding, 300,000 additional funding, I believe, to allow a few more people to pay their bills. It's a bit of a convoluted process because of the way the coronavirus relief funds worked. So the customer who has the arrearages needs to certify to that, and then the amount of arrearages are sent to the wastewater system or water system. We would just ask that you consider or keep in mind the need for that program to be continued or revisited, re-upped. Because the problem definitely has not gone away just because the coronavirus relief funds ran out. And I would also say that the same is actually true of the local government expense reimbursement program. And that was run by the Department of Taxes. Those funds, those applications were closed on October 15th. Towns had until the end of the year to spend the dollars, but some of them weren't able to spend all those dollars. And again, there are continuing expenses at the local level that are due to COVID that we're hoping there might be some reimbursement for. And having said all that, we are working very closely with the National League of Cities and our congressional delegation. We've heard that there may, in fact, finally be direct aid to states and municipalities from the federal government. And we're certainly hoping that that is the case. But if it isn't, which has turned out to be what happened a few times before, we hope that you'll keep in mind the needs at the local level. And I gave you a memo that Faith posted just a little while ago, and it has excerpts from both the Public Service Department website and the Tax Department website about those two programs, just as a refresher.
Okay. Karen, do you have any numbers about how much in arrearages the towns are carrying?
Tom really has the more recent figures.
Okay, and those were all figured in Tom's numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
We are sending out a survey right after town meeting. We cannot harass our members before town meeting. So with another
Yep.
survey, so we're doing that right after town meeting and asking them again about arrearages and utility bills and also delinquencies, requests for abatement of property taxes. And
Okay.
updated figures.
That would be helpful. All right, committee questions. Okay. I'm not seeing any.
It's Zoom fatigue.
I'm with you. And I'll say, I have another meeting at 4, so committee, I guess that's it. If we have no other questions. 2 things. First, I read this morning the obituary for George Chafee, who was the commissioner of insurance and DFR, who created the captive insurance legislation. So we lost him this week. And I just also want to make sure you knew that joint fiscal is meeting at 4 to accept and the $200 million rent assistance and utility arrearages bill. The last I heard, and Senator Sirotkin may know more than I do at this point, I think the proposal is going to be to get half of it out the door right away and then to put the other half through the appropriations process. Because I think
that's
we gave the governor some emergency funds in the BAA from COVID. So he has money to move if he needs to take emergency action. But I think that's what's going to happen. You heard that the 3.2 million that didn't go out the door and was originally going to be taken back, and from the department is still there, but it's frozen. The intent is that it should be used for broadband, but it can't go anywhere until the legislature acts. So we have a little slush fund there. And my question is, Senator Sirotkin, when we're talking about utility arrearages, is broadband qualify at all? Do we know?
I have not heard broadband being discussed. They have their own pot of money coming in, starting in March, a specific designated program from the federal government for internet bills and subsidies.
Okay, good.
But water, fuel, electricity, all of that is allowable uses under the $200 million.
So we will get that, everything but property taxes. So
We'll find a way.
we're not, yeah, that just about the time we're getting set to go home, that full storm will hit us. Because this will be the year that's coming off of the, last year where we had no money. So that I think is it. Senator Bray.
Yeah, I just had a question. I know we'll be coming back to the Rygate S1 bill at some point.
Tomorrow or Friday, this week.
Okay, and I don't know if it's, I don't really want this to be an academic question, but it does seem like something, I'll follow the committee's lead on this, but there's a part of me that wonders if we're going to basically spend an extra $10 million in the form of higher rates, is there a way to use the same amount of money to better affect, even if we're targeting the same industry in the same part of the state? And just as a for instance, if you didn't burn the wood up in that generating station if you made pellets, and that became part of our wood supply. So how many people will be employed that way? All that kind of stuff. And I know you already worked on this last year, so I'm treading lightly, but I just don't know if there was a consideration of how would you spend the 10 if you had a choice between lever A and lever B?
Okay, I'm trying to figure out who talked to us last year about the role of Rygate in our entire, what do we call it? Energy portfolio and renewable portfolio. And I'm going to get them on. Faith is finding the witness list. We didn't do a whole lot about alternative economic development because you don't just open a pellet plant the day you close Rygate.
Right.
And I know there have been efforts trying to get a pellet plant in that area of Vermont. And as far as I know, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Right.
But we might find a way to stage that. You
Right.
might want to give a call over to ACCD. I'm still trying to find out who might know something
Right.
and see what we
I'm
can
sorry.
find out.
I'm thinking Commissioner Snyder would probably have some pretty good information.
I've asked that he be prepared to talk about the economic impact.
Right. And there was a guy who came in to the Biomass Energy Development Working Group years ago, and he was starting a new business then, and I think he's still operating. He's in Clarendon. His name is Chris Brooks. And I think he may have been thinking about creating a second site to make chips, since he already figured out the business once. So if you like, I'll
Yes,
give
if
him
you
a
can get some
call.
contact information
Okay.
for us. I don't know if Faith has access to that list of witnesses. Okay, so you think about a new business, because Clarendon isn't anywhere near.
Right.
Was toying, as I was touring Orange County this weekend, of too bad we've got COVID, maybe just doing a tour of Rygate from our individual cars. So you could, do I need to say it would be very difficult to put a wood burning plant anywhere near towns or homes? And it is in the middle of nowhere. So there isn't much around it to work with. Senator McDonald.
We learned last year that there was nothing around it, because one of the proposals was to take a look and see if they couldn't use it for district heat, which there's nothing there to heat. The suggestion that Senator Bray makes, Rygate is serviced by rail. The railroad brings chips right to Rygate, and Rygate does not have a nearby neighbors. It already has 30 truckloads, the equivalent of 30 truckloads of trips per day going to Rygate, which compares to the single truckload going to district heat in Montpelier. So
We tried that
probably-
last year, didn't we?
we discussed it, and we
Yeah.
found out that those numbers were somewhat lopsided. Just as an aside, the Times Argus had a story on district heat in Montpelier this weekend, which is worth reading for the members of Natural Resources Committee and Finance to read. But one of the challenges for programs like that is Act 250 permits, but this is a facility that already has rail, already has truck traffic, and already doesn't have neighbors that would be immediately likely to object to increased or new activities. And I have no idea on what the conversion costs might be for doing a pellet to make processing pellets. But there are a lot of things that are already set up for pellet processing by its
if you could put it in that plant, or
Yeah.
you might have to tear the whole thing down and start
Maybe,
over.
maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not a good idea, but it certainly is worth looking into.
But it would not happen overnight.
Yep.
I mean, I know there was talk about trying to get a pellet plant up there in that area. I mean, this is the border of the Northeast Kingdom.
Right.
And we've been trying to figure out how to get anything in there that would spur the economy for years, and it has been difficult.
Yeah, when we had when the bill came up last year on the floor of the Senate, there were discussions and questions about whether it was a good idea, a bad idea, and the conclusion, I believe, with the wrap up by the President Pro Tem was that yes, those questions about its effectiveness and were all valid, but under the circumstances, we should consider it as the economic development for an area that was having a lot of people put out of work. And if we're going to pursue this, it ought to be that might be the pellet thing would fit into that effort. So
I don't know that we need to do 10 years. We could do a phased out if we found something that could go in, but I'm going to find out and about who we'd talk to about how this fits into our whole renewables portfolio. And then we'll find out about economic development potentials. We have got air quality people coming in this week.
Right.
So Senator Bray.
So I just
Senator
checked, and Chris Brooks's company is still up and running. So I'll give him a call, just check it out a little bit, and I'll pass the information along to Faith so she has contact.
That would be
information.
good. Thank you.
The other thing that occurs to me as we're talking about this a little bit, so I'm not flogging this, as I just want to think about it. And we do have advanced wood heat as part of our clean energy proposals, and some of that advanced wood heat runs on pellets. So it could be that the things would mesh. The two things would help one another. So I'll pass information along to Faith, and I'll give Mr. Brooks a call.
And if Natural Resources knows anything about the market in chips and pellets, I know a few years ago there was a shortage. I think the Barry Town School runs on wood chips.
Right.
And I know Montpelier Fire Department has put in a wood burning furnace, but I'm not remembering what form of wood it burns.
Right. Yeah. I'd have to come up to date. My impression from what I've seen in the past is that the really big plants run on chips, and that smaller small commercial and residential stuff might have a big, like a grain silo, even like a bin full of pellets.
Seen them. This one had an arm that kind of swept it in. Big
The
table. It was older model, but interesting. Senator
Pellets,
Pearson. No? Okay. Senator McDonald. Senator Pearson, we have got your constituent coming in.
I saw that. Thank you.
Senator McDonald.
Pellets tend to follow the price of oil, and there was a concern that Europe buys a lot of pellets when oil prices are high. So there's a worry that
Could export?
pellets, well, they were exported. They were,
Okay.
pellets were exported when the price was of oil was very high, and the United States had few pellet burning stoves and facilities. So we don't want to get to the point where we're cutting down all the fires to sell pellets any more than.
But How
and
the price-
exporting. them. So that's
How the price of wool is.
long range concern. Yeah.
We could bring back the sheep once we cut down the forest. If the price of wool is high enough. Okay, I think that's it, guys. I need about a 5-minute break before we start in again. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Take a look at the agenda. We weren't able to change the discussion from Friday. It's hard on Faith to start changing next week's discussion on Friday. So starting next week, we're going to put committee discussion in the end of the day on Wednesday for the next week's agenda. So, and then, because Faith and I set the agenda on Thursday, and then it gets posted on Friday, usually about noon, so that folks know what we're doing. So we're still feeling our way through this, but I shall see everybody. Thank you. And we can all leave and I'll go find, but anyone can listen to joint fiscal who would like.
Ending live stream now.